The world watched in stunned silence, as news broke of an unprecedented meeting that would soon dominate every headline and conversation across the globe. US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, two of the world's most controversial and powerful leaders, met face-to-face in Anchorage, Alaska, in August 2025, a location as unexpected as the summit itself. The secret summit, confirmed only after eagle-eyed analysts spotted both leaders' planes on satellite images, sent shockwaves through international circles. Even seasoned diplomats and intelligence agencies were caught off guard, scrambling to verify the news as it spread like wildfire. The world soon learned the summit's urgent purpose: to broker an end to the brutal, grinding war in Ukraine, a conflict that had devastated millions and destabilized the region for years. Alaska's symbolism was impossible to ignore. Once a vast Russian territory, now firmly part of the United States, it provided a dramatic backdrop, one that suggested a meeting of equals and a chance to rewrite history on neutral ground. For Trump, the remote snow-covered city of Anchorage offered a stage far removed from the pressures of Washington and the scrutiny of European capitals, a place where bold moves could be made away from prying eyes. The secrecy and isolation of the location underscored just how high the stakes were. With security tighter than ever and the press kept at bay, the talks took on a deeply personal, almost clandestine character. In Kyiv, Ukrainian officials were blindsided and deeply anxious, fearing that their nation's fate was being decided behind closed doors, without their voice at the table. European leaders too were alarmed. In Brussels, Paris, and Berlin, urgent meetings were called as fears grew that a hasty deal might sacrifice Ukraine's sovereignty for the sake of a quick peace, undermining years of Western unity. The Alaska summit instantly became the world's most talked-about diplomatic event, dominating front pages and sparking heated debates about the future of Ukraine, the balance of power, and the very rules of global diplomacy. As the world waited breathlessly for details to emerge, one thing was certain: the path to peace had become far more unpredictable, and the stakes for Ukraine and the world had never been higher. President Trump's approach to the Ukraine war is pure deal-maker, fast, direct, and transactional. He rejects slow, traditional diplomacy, aiming instead for a sweeping, one-shot peace deal. After Alaska, Trump emerged with a closely guarded framework, rumored to include controversial land swaps. He sees this as a pragmatic solution, focused on results, not process. But European allies are alarmed, fearing Trump's rush could pressure Ukraine into sacrificing sovereignty and set a dangerous precedent. Critics warn that rewarding aggression undermines justice and self-determination. Supporters hail Trump's boldness, arguing only his unconventional style can break the deadlock. He's betting his legacy on convincing Ukraine and the world that his path leads to real peace. The stakes couldn't be higher. As Trump and Putin met in Alaska, the world watched closely, speculating about the future of Ukraine and the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The summit sent ripples through the international community, raising questions about alliances, intentions, and the fate of nations caught in the crossfire of global politics. President Zelensky responded from Kyiv with unwavering defiance, his voice echoing through the halls of government and across the airwaves. He stood before his people and the world, resolute and unyielding, determined to defend his country's sovereignty at any cost. Ukraine's leader made it clear: sovereignty and territorial integrity are not negotiable. These are the foundations of Ukraine's identity, and Zelensky refused to let them be bartered away in backroom deals or international summits. Zelensky rejected any land swaps outright, insisting that ceding territory would only embolden Russia and betray Ukraine's history, culture, and the sacrifices of its people. He reminded the world that every inch of Ukrainian land carries the weight of generations. He declared that any peace plan must be a Ukrainian plan, crafted by Ukrainians for Ukrainians. Zelensky demanded a full Russian withdrawal from all occupied regions, including Crimea and Donbas, making it clear that only a complete restoration of Ukraine's borders would be acceptable. This uncompromising stance rallied Ukrainians from all walks of life, uniting them in a common cause. It also put the world on notice: peace cannot be imposed on Ukraine from the outside, nor can its future be dictated by foreign powers. Zelensky's moral clarity became his greatest strength, inspiring hope even as Ukraine faced overwhelming odds. His leadership in the darkest hours gave his people the courage to resist and persevere. He reframed the conflict as a fight for survival, justice, and international law, not just a negotiation between great powers. Zelensky reminded the world that Ukraine's struggle was a test of the global commitment to freedom and the rule of law. By refusing to yield, Zelensky set the terms for any future talks, making it clear that Ukraine would not be coerced or sidelined in decisions about its own destiny. He is not a bystander, he's the architect of Ukraine's vision for peace, working tirelessly with his advisors and military leaders to chart a path forward that honors the sacrifices of his people. His message was unwavering. Peace must be earned through justice and respect for sovereignty, not through compromise or capitulation. Only then, he insisted, could true and lasting peace be achieved. The world now had to reckon with a leader who would not be sidelined. A president whose resolve forced even the most powerful nations to reconsider their strategies and assumptions. Ukraine's future, Zelensky insisted, would not be decided without Ukraine. The nation's voice would be heard, and its fate would be determined by its own people, standing together in the face of adversity. For Putin, the Alaska summit was far more than just a diplomatic event. It was a carefully orchestrated move designed to project power, legitimacy, and control on the world stage. Every detail, from his arrival to his posture at the conference table, was meant to send a message: Russia is back, and Putin is at the helm. Russian media wasted no time framing the summit as a resounding triumph. News anchors and headlines celebrated Putin's role, portraying him as a statesman, negotiating on equal footing with the US president. This narrative was broadcast across Russia, reinforcing his image as a powerful leader who commands respect from the West. But behind closed doors, the reality was more complex. Putin's proposal, a freeze of front lines in exchange for Ukrainian withdrawal from Donetsk, wasn't just about peace. It was a calculated bid for a strategic victory, cleverly disguised as a compromise. His advisors worked tirelessly, weighing every word and move to ensure Russia's interests would be advanced. Even as he spoke of peace, Russia's military campaign in Ukraine pressed on relentlessly. The shelling didn't stop, and Ukrainian cities remained under constant threat, making it clear that the war was far from over. This dual strategy, negotiating at the table while waging war on the ground, serves a dual purpose. It keeps relentless pressure on Ukraine while also testing the patience and unity of Western nations watching from afar. Putin's true objective isn't a fair or lasting peace. Instead, he seeks a settlement that locks in Russian territorial gains, secures Moscow's interests, and leaves Ukraine weakened and vulnerable for years to come. By participating in high-profile talks, Putin aims to exploit divisions among Ukraine's allies. He hopes to sow discord, erode their resolve, and push them toward accepting a settlement that favors Russia's terms. The Alaska summit, in this light, was just another calculated move in Putin's long and patient geopolitical game. A game where every negotiation, every headline, and every military maneuver is part of a larger strategy. He's betting that time itself, along with growing Western fatigue and political distractions, will eventually tip the balance in his favor, allowing Russia to outlast its opponents. For Putin, the ultimate endgame is clear: to see Russian influence fully restored across Eastern Europe, reshaping the region's future for generations to come. The Alaska summit sent shockwaves through Europe, where leaders felt blindsided and deeply concerned. For years, Europe insisted on a transparent peace process with Ukraine at its core. Trump's unilateral move raised fears of a deal that could compromise the continent's security and reward Russian aggression. The idea of land swaps is seen as a dangerous precedent, undermining international law. Excluding Europe and Ukraine from talks reinforced the narrative of great powers deciding smaller nations' fates. European leaders remain adamant: only Ukraine can decide its future. They're reinforcing support for Kyiv, determined that any peace must be just and sustainable. Europe watches anxiously, hoping for peace but fearing the cost of a rushed deal. What began as a diplomatic ambush became a strategic victory for Zelensky. Anticipating back-channel talks, Ukraine released intelligence proving Russia was preparing a new offensive while negotiating peace. The evidence, intercepted communications and satellite images, exposed Russia's duplicity and shattered Putin's peacemaker image. Trump, caught off guard, faced criticism for trusting Putin. Zelensky's move shifted the narrative. Russia's peace overtures were a smokescreen for renewed aggression. The world rallied behind Ukraine, recognizing the Alaska summit as a Russian ploy. Zelensky was no longer sidelined. he held the cards. The focus turned to Russia's bad faith, not Ukraine's concessions. International support for Kiev surged. Zelensky had turned vulnerability into strength on the world stage. At the heart of any Ukraine peace deal is the question of security guarantees. For Ukraine, these must be ironclad promises from powerful nations to defend it if attacked, far stronger than past assurances. After giving up its nuclear arsenal in the 1990s, Ukraine demands robust, binding guarantees to prevent future invasions. Zelensky insists on commitments from the US, UK, and France, similar to NATO's Article 5. Trump has floated such guarantees, but the details remain contentious. Will they trigger automatic military response or just consultations? Who will sign and ratify them? For Ukraine, ambiguity is unacceptable. Security must be absolute. For the West, it's a monumental commitment, risking future conflict. There's concern Trump could use guarantees as leverage for Ukrainian concessions. Without real guarantees, any peace deal would be built on sand. Despite diplomatic momentum, the emerging peace framework is fraught with peril. Trading land for peace remains the most dangerous sticking point, unacceptable to Ukraine and alarming to Europe. Other potential concessions, like limiting Ukraine's military or alliances, could leave it permanently vulnerable. Trump's focus on a quick deal risks overlooking long-term consequences. A rushed agreement might look good on paper but could unravel, emboldening Russia and destabilizing the region. The world's desire for peace is strong, but a flawed deal could be disastrous. Zelensky faces the challenge of balancing peace with sovereignty and security. The choices made now will shape Ukraine and the global order for generations. As the dust settles from Alaska and Zelensky's countermove, the world stands at a crossroads. The path to peace is more complex and uncertain than ever. Trump pushes for a deal, Putin maintains pressure, and Zelensky refuses to sacrifice Ukraine's future. Ukrainians endure war and uncertainty, trusting Zelensky to defend their sovereignty. Europe scrambles to uphold international law and unity, wary of Trump's go-it-alone tactics. The outcome will set a precedent for future global conflicts. Achieving lasting peace will require more than a handshake. It must be just, secure, and respect Ukraine's sovereignty. Russia must abandon imperial ambitions for true peace to take hold. The world holds its breath, hoping for resolution but fearing a return to war. The next chapter is unwritten, and the stakes could not be higher.